This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1460, Top 5 JSA Society of America Members.
Laser beams, opinions like the seasons on everything you read in comics, movies, games, toys, artists, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek speak, comic geek, uniting the world's mightiest heroes. This is...
I'm Jamie D.
I'm Shane Kelly. And I'm Adam Murdo.
Alrighty, welcome, friends, to the show that never, ever seems to end. It does. We only do usually an hour and a half to 2 hours of a show. So our show does end. But while we do it, we thank our very, very generous sponsors for helping us out and for defraying some of the costs we incur while we do this show. And this episode is brought to you by our good friends at Discount Comic Book Service, where we want to get great comics at great prices. And Discount Comic Book Service does this in spades, starting with the fact that every Marvel and DC book right off the bat is 45% off. A lot of Image books, Dark Horse Comics books do follow suit. And every Marvel and DC new trade paperback is 50% off, no matter what that trade paperback is. It is 50% off, whether it be a $125 omnibus or a $9.99 Vertigo trade. They are half off. They have so you go to their website, you check out what they have. One thing they love doing is they love their bundles. What's a bundle, you ask? It is where they take a different company, a different imprint from said company, or just different type of book, i.e. the DC Kids bundle, and they give it to you at half price. They bundle all the books together, give them to you at half price. One of their great bundles is the Valiant bundle, where every single Valiant book is in that bundle. You get that for half price. Right now there is a DC bundle. It's I'm looking at that. It says try all DC issues for 50% off, and then it's $8.97. So I'm not sure exactly what that is. Don't have real time to look at it. We do have the kids bundle, as I said. There is an Image bundle where there are 20 of the newest Image titles for half price. There's a Marvel Now bundle where that is every Marvel Now book. And normally it's $169 value. You're getting that for $84.79. And just some really great deals. You can go in there. You can also look at other deals that they have. Sometimes they'll have some books, just recent books that they may have overstock on, where they'll offer those for like $1, for 50 cents, 75 cents. I've seen that for some of those books. So check them out. Discount Comic Book Service. DCBService.com if you want to go to get great books and have them delivered right to your house at the best price out there. Discount Comic Book Service. Alrighty. This episode we are going to do one of our infamous or famous top 5 episodes where we just take a certain title or certain subject and we decide what our top 5 are. They may not be yours. That's why we have our forums, so you can tell us what yours are. You can yell at your device you're listening to us on and say, "You idiots, why do you think of that?" Then that's when you go to our forums, you say, "This is what I think our top 5 should be." This episode, we're doing top 5 JSA Society of America members. We've done Avengers. We have done JLA members, Justice League of America members. We decided, why not do a JSA Society of America? This was Mr. Murdo's suggestion.
Yep, just to prove we're not ageist over here.
Yes. And one of the things I have always loved about JSA Society, and especially what they've done lately with it, is it is a very generational title where they've tried to keep the same basic member group, but making them either sons, family members, non-family members, total strangers.
Protégés?
Yes, that have just taken up the mantle of great characters such as Sandman or Stripe or, you name it. There's a lot of generational. Starman is in there too. A lot of generational characters. So who wants to start off? Who wants to start with their and these are mine are in actually no particular order. These are just my top 5
no, I don't
picks.
have them in order this time either.
Do you want to start? Mr.?
Hourman.
Okay.
The robotic Hourman.
Oh, okay, the android.
Yes,
Cool.
absolutely.
My number 5 is the second Black Canary.
Very cool. And my number 5, I'm going to go with Stars and Stripe, the Courtney Whitmore, Pat Dugan Stars and Stripe. Now, Pat wasn't always in a lot of the JSA, but he still was there in the background.
Yeah. Hourman's just cool. I thought this iteration of it was not what was it introduced?
DC 1 million.
1 million, thank you. I wasn't too keen on it at first, but what they did for him in the JSA and then really in his own series really rocketed it to one of my favorite books of all time. For the 25 issues that it was out, or 26 something.
A little more than 25.
Wasn't much more
in that ballpark.
I personally think it was one of the most underappreciated books that was out there. On
Yeah,
the show.
absolutely.
We've all said that
Yeah.
many times.
Talk about something that should be given a really nice hardback trade or something. Whew. Or a
Unanimous vote
hardback
there.
dress. It's just a really cool character, a really neat twist on something to go along with keeping the same character of Hourman in the JSA and in the DC universe, and putting a new little twist on it, making him able to, he's from the future and comes back to the past. Boy, I even forget how through DC 1 million, how he gets stuck here, and then has adventures all throughout the present day DC universe. It was just a lot of fun to read and see, and began a great love of mine for, like Jamie said, the mentoring the JSA does for all of the DC universe for up and coming family members that want to get into superheroing, as well as just other people finding their powers and places in superheroism, and they took on the burden to mentor these people, to show them the ropes. It was really neat.
Yep, I quite agree. I mean, it's I don't think Jeff Johns has quite the same affection for the android Hourman that we do, because he shuffled him out of there as quickly as he could in favor of a revamped, juiced up Rick Tyler, the son,
which was good
of the
too.
original.
That was interesting to read, but I really liked the android.
Yeah, he's very lovable. He's just very innocent, and in his quest, he's got all this godlike power over the flow of time itself, and he sacrifices almost all of that power just for the sake of staying here in dumb old backwater, late 20th, early 21st century to try and learn about what it's like to be human. And as Jamie said, the JSA of the late 90s, early 2000s was, the major theme was legacy and the cooperation between generations of heroes. That is a character that took the concept of a legacy character and shot a psychotropic drug cocktail into its arm. And it's like it's this really weird hyperbolic super science spin on the idea of a legacy character. Instead of like a son or a former sidekick or something like that, this is an android from 85,000 years in the future whose gene wear is patterned on the Miraclo-laced genome of the original Hourman, Rex Tic-Toc Tyler.
And he was part of that century's JLA.
Yes.
Originally.
Right. From part of the Justice League 1 million from the year 85,271, I think. So, yeah, he's a neat character, really interesting power set. Tom Pyre was doing really fun things with him in that series that we unanimously love. And I always felt like he wasn't really used to his fullest effect in JSA.
No.
The Hunt for Extant is probably the best example of a JSA story that made good use of the android Hourman. But yeah, he just kind of slipped off stage left a couple of years into it after Jeff Johns took over full writing duties.
Sadly.
Aye, more's the pity. But, as you said, the Rick Tyler character wasn't bad either.
No.
No, although I think I preferred the way Roy Thomas wrote him in Infinity Inc. to what Johns made of him. Made him too much a clone of his pop. All right, my number 5 was, as I said, the Black Canary. This is the daughter of the Golden Age original. This is Dinah Laurel Lance as opposed to Dinah Drake Lance. And I chose her because, well, she's just such a great example of the theme of legacy. She is arguably, as per post-crisis DC single universe continuity, the first legacy hero who the second generation of superheroes on Earth who had a direct tie to the first generation. I mean, we had Barry Allen coming on as the Flash, but he had no real connection to the original Flash. He just admired him and decided to pattern himself after the original Flash. But in the case of the younger Black Canary, she is actually the daughter of a Golden Age superheroine who has grown up at the feet of the greatest generation of DC Universe superheroes, and has learned from them, and has been surrounded by the stuff and pith of and idealism of superheroics since she was so high. And eventually she grew up and decided that there was nothing else for her to do with her life but become a superhero. She became a founding member, again, via the post-crisis DC continuity, of the Justice League. This is when Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman were not in the picture, and the founders were Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, and Black Canary. And she got to be there she was instrumental in that generation of superheroics. And when the Justice Society made its big comeback in 1999, she was right there at the ground floor. The perfect intergenerational ambassador. She had been a member of the Justice League from the beginning, and now here she was helping to start up this new version of the Justice Society. And I thought it was great to see her come into her own that way. I liked the way Robinson wrote her. I particularly liked one scene from the first issue of that JSA relaunch in '99, which showed Black Canary, the younger, beating up on a group of thugs, just being just totally routine and methodical about it. I mean, she was practically on autopilot. The great thing was she was just making short work of these ruffians while at the same time mentally composing her grocery shopping list. It's just a great way to bring across what a consummate professional crime fighter Black Canary had become, having again grown up at the feet of the JSA and being a founding member of the JLA, and by now she's just a well-oiled crime-fighting machine, one of the best in the business of her generation.
And she was through Birds of Prey at that time,
yes,
too.
Yes, she was, which is why she was not more active with the group than she was. She hung around for a year or two, and I think she begged off on a lot of their adventures because she had, because the editorial office in charge of Birds of Prey had other uses for her. But it was she became such a strong character. I mean, so often in prior decades, the Black Canary was nothing more than a pair of fishnets. But she became a more well-developed personality, and she came into her own as a fighter and as, well, kind of a liaison between different camps of crime fighters. And she was kind of an ambassador or a diplomat, in addition to being such an excellent crime fighter. And she kind of honed her espionage skills too, as a member of the Birds of Prey strike force. And this is all coming off of Mark Waid and Barry Kitson's JLA Year One too, and kind of building on the things that Mark Waid had established about what Dinah Laurel Lance was like early in her career. So she was definitely she was kind of the mortar that helped to hold this new late 90s, early 2000s version of the JSA together. I thought she was used very well there, and I thought that I'm trying to keep my list somewhat intergenerational, plucking characters from different periods of the group's history. And I'm assuming this is open to JSAers like old and new, like actual. Sure. So I guess if we wanted to, we could even throw in some characters from the current Earth 2 series.
Yeah, that thought crossed my mind, but I refrained.
Yep, so did I.
Did she chair the JSA in those early years?
Oh, you mean of the early years of the current?
Yeah, of the revamp in the late 90s.
Yeah. For some reason, I think she did.
I did too, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I don't think either one of us is really sure about that, but I would not at all be surprised. She seems to me the logical choice. I mean, there were a few of the original wave there, the old guard, Jay Garrick and Ted Grant and Alan Scott, but I think they were only too willing to defer to her because I think all those other three guys had already served as chairman at one time or another, so why not let one of the whippersnappers take over? And she was first among whippersnappers in my mind. So I thought that she would be, I wanted to represent her, let her represent the like the Silver Age generation of heroes in my list of top 5 JSAers.
Very cool. For me, it was one of the ones. It was one of those series that I didn't pick up at first, or I picked up right about the same time just to kind of give it a try. It was written by a thereto unknown young gentleman by the name of Jeff Johns. It's kind of it's one of those titles that really solidified him as one of my favorite writers. But it was the Stars and Stripe, and this was Courtney Whitmore, who was the stepdaughter of Pat Dugan, who was Stripe or Stripesy. It was Stripesy was his original sidekick name, and he was a sidekick of what was
the Star Spangled Kid.
It was Curtis Pemberton,
Sylvester
Pemberton,
Sylvester John Pemberton,
Jr. Who was the original Stars. It was with STRS.
Mm-hmm. No, the Star Spangled
The Star
Kid.
Spangled Kid. Duh.
Mm-hmm.
Duh.
Acronyms on the brain there.
That's right. So this was kind of a female take. She had his belt of power. She would eventually, as the stories go, get Jack Knight's cosmic rod, and kind of gave her superhuman strength. And then her sidekick, as I said, mentor was Pat in this giant robot outfit. It was a very interesting series. It was a coming of age, kind of like, she hated Pat at first, but then she came to appreciate him, and she had this annoying stepbrother who was Pat's son, and he was the typical annoying boy, and it was just a lot of fun reading this story. And then to watch her mature and come into her own as a member of the Justice Society was very cool. She was almost a legacy pledge from like a fraternity. She came in and she kind of had she had the name, and she eventually would learn how to use her powers, learn how to become a hero, and eventually kind of go off on her own. Pat kind of had his family to protect, and she didn't need him as much anymore to be her mentor. So I thought it just took the greatness, as we talked about it, of the Justice Society, which was to take the JSA, which was to take heroes whose name, and honestly, this is one of the better examples of taking a character and changing the character, i.e., this was now a white character, now he's black, or now this was a male character, now it's a female, this was, now it's a Muslim character, or now it's something else. This is one of the better examples of taking a character, kind of switching it around and giving it a new spin. And I really thought it worked. It was a character I enjoyed watching mature. It was a character that, again, it was another book that was underappreciated, didn't last very long. And Jeff Johns took this character and then put it into Justice Society when as a main character when her series itself ended. So this was just one of those characters that was fun to watch and watch grow, and is even, playing a main part, is a main character in the Justice League of America storyline going on right now with Martian Manhunter and the Firestorm from the New 52. So it is definitely a character that hasn't been forgotten. Mm-hmm. It may go away at times. It may not be at the forefront of stories, but it's still there, still going strong. And just, to me, a lot of character that I thought I had a lot of fun following.
Yeah, I got in on Stars and Stripe. on the ground floor too, Jamie, and I too was very sorry to see it last as short a time as it did.
Yeah.
But it was full of nods to DC history. I mean, Johns was toying around with bringing back the Shining Knight and the Seven Soldiers of Victory in there because Star Spangled Kid and Stripesy were both members of that group.
Yep.
And, what I liked about Courtney was that she had such a unique motivation for becoming a superhero in the first place, to piss off her stepdad.
Oh, yeah.
That's the only reason she did that, just to get under old Stripesy's skin. And she insisted on calling him Stripesy, just as a dig at him. But as you said, Jamie, she matured right quickly. She had the power, she had the costumes, she had the name, she had that cosmic converter belt strapped around her waist. But eventually she grew into the proper motivations for using all of those tools of the superhero trade. And at that point, she realized that her stepdad was not such a butthead after all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a good kind of mentoring story. And it's good a reconciliation between generations using superheroics as the medium.
Yeah.
And I love when Jack Knight handed off the Cosmic Rod to her and really created a lineage from Starman to Stargirl and beyond then.
Yeah. Yeah. That's my number 5. Mr. Murdo, your number 4.
My number 4 will be Dr. Fate,
Dun, dun, dun.
the original Dr. Fate.
My number 4 is Jay Garrick the Flash.
Mine, I had Black Canary, the one you had said, but I'm going to go with one of my alternates, Liberty Bell.
Oh, okay. So like Jesse Chambers?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, Dr. Fate. I first got into DC Comics around the time of 0 Hour Crisis in Time. In fact, it was exactly at the time of 0 Hour Crisis in Time that I had dabbled in a couple of other issues of DC Comics here and there. I had bought The Death of Superman. I had gotten the Emerald Twilight story. But 0 Hour was my opportunity to dive into the DC universe in all its richness, depth, and complexity. And the JSA figured pretty prominently in that story, you may remember. It was DC's second highly questionable, if not altogether objectionable, attempt to forcibly retire the JSA characters. They tried it once before, right after Crisis, sent them all off to limbo. They came back in the early 90s as part of the Armageddon Inferno story, and DC tried them out in like a limited series, even a short-lived ongoing series. It was maybe a little bit too cartoony for the taste of the early 90s comics consumer. They didn't last very long, so they...
Which is sad, because that was such a good series.
Yeah, it was Ty Templeton? Am I
Yes.
remembering that right? Because I own all the issues.
Marty Pasco, too. I think Martin Pasco.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think one of them was written by Len Kaminsky.
Okay.
But I can never remember whether it's the ongoing series or the limited series. They lasted about the same number of issues.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So DC put them all out to pasture again with 0 Hour, and I remember seeing images of good old Dr. Fate in his blue and gold costume in some of the promotional art. I still have an old, like a promotional little flyer card, about postcard size. I have it pinned to a corkboard in my old childhood bedroom, and it depicts Dr. Fate, among other characters, flying into this like time vortex thing. It was basically the 0 Hour logo. It looks kind of like a shattering clock face. And I just thought it was a really cool visual, the blue and the gold color scheme, the amulet, that expressionless full-face helmet that he wore. Part of the time. As, back in the Golden Age, he wore that, and he also sometimes wore a helmet that only covered half of his face. Roy Thomas went out of his way during his excellent All-Star Squadron series in the 80s to try and explain retroactively how and why it was that Kent Nelson, who at that time was the man inside Fate's costume, alternated between those two kinds of helmet. And Roy Thomas also was at pains to tell us several times over that because of the change in helmet, Dr. Fate had taken a cut in his power levels. He was just kind of superhumanly strong. He had enough magic left to fly and do a couple of other simple tricks. Roy Thomas established that the reason Kent Nelson did this was because he was tired of the entity Nabu the Wise taking more and more direct control over Kent Nelson's actions. But he was the Justice Society's resident mystic in the old days, one of several characters who wielded magic in some form, but the one who seemed to have the most complete control over the magical forces he wielded. I mean, you had the Spectre, who was basically he didn't so much wield magic as he was magic. You had Johnny Thunder, who was kind of a dumbass, and you had Alan Scott, who had that magic ring of his that could only achieve a certain number of effects. Dr. Fate is the one who was the most versatile magician, I would argue. And I like the costume. I like the mysterious demeanor he had about himself. It was that helmet really drew it all together.
And it was a mysterious demeanor without being dark and gray, black. It was golden, like you said, blue, very brilliant.
Yeah, so he
It's
can
still
be
mysterious.
both bright and mysterious all at once. That's hard to pull off. But Kent Nelson totally did it. And eventually, the character went through some interesting evolutionary stages over the years. Eventually, Kent Nelson's life partner, Inza Kramer, came on and shared the identity of Dr. Fate with him. It was retconned eventually, sometime in the 80s, I think, when James DeMatteis had.
Was it the... God, I want to say the Imperative Teasdale or something like that.
The Teasdale Imperative.
Okay.
I remember the title, never read the story, I have no idea what it's about.
I can't remember.
But in time, it was revealed that Dr. Fate was always meant to be a merger of a male and a female person. And we got those new bearers of the mantle, Eric and Linda Strauss, for a little while there. And then Kent and Inza came back, and they merged into a single being to become Dr. Fate. It's a balance between chaos and order kind of thing. But it turns out that Nabu gave the power of Dr. Fate just to Kent Nelson because he thought a single wielder of the power, and a single male wielder at that, would be easier for Nabu, for him to control. So the partnership between the two is it's one of my favorite golden age marriages. Those two coming together and actually completely sharing the lifestyle of the superhero, even more so than like Carter and Shira Hall. I mean, they shared a lot of experiences, fought a lot of crime together, but they never merged into a single crime fighter to do it. So I've always thought that was an interesting wrinkle. But yeah, I can say a lot of other things about Dr. Fate too, but it kind of all comes back to the costume.
Did he wield, and I could be thinking wrong, chaos magic only?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Not chaos at all. Order.
Okay.
Order, because Nabu was a lord of order.
All right.
Yeah, so, yeah. But I think Nabu was eventually punished by being transformed into a lord of chaos for having corrupted his agent, Dr. Fate, the way that he did. So, yeah, and the whole wrinkle of throwing of the agents of the lords of chaos and order, throwing them in there was that's another thing to enrich the character still further. But yeah, he's a great visual, and I love the fact that he's a mage, and as you said, Shane, he's not too dark and mysterious. Wielder of eldritch forces.
Might be a little aloof, but not.
Yeah, well, a lot aloof at times, depending
not dark
on how deeply Nabu had his claws sunk into Dr. Fate at any given time. But sometimes he could be downright approachable when he was wearing that Helson of his. Helson, yeah. Half Nelson, Kent Nelson, half helmet.
Charlie Horse.
It's all
Crazy Horse.
bumping together in my brain here. But so yes, Dr. Fate, he's been one of my favorite JSAers. If I could be any member of the JSA, I would probably choose to be Dr. Fate.
And for my money, I prefer yellow versus gold, as yellow and blue versus gold and blue for his costume.
I think I agree with you there. Well, the helmet has to be gold because it's metallic,
Right,
but the cloak,
yeah,
that's yellow, no doubt about it. To Jamie,
Coke's yellow. The Coke's wow. The cloak's yeller. I tell you, he's yeller. Jay Garrick. He is Flash is always I've found an interesting character. I always enjoyed the Flash, and this is the first. This is the original. This is the Flash that started it all. Jay Garrick. He's I've always looking back on it. It's kind of a silly origin, but his origin was he fell asleep in his lab. He inhaled at the time what they called. I'm looking at the Wikipedia.
hard water.
Yes, they called it hard water, but then they would change it to heavy water.
I thought it was heavy.
Well, mercury in any
Yeah.
case. So there's a connection between Mercury, the chemical, and Mercury, the god of speed.
Yes, which we all know. The heavy water has to do with nuclear power and all that kind of stuff. And he woke up, and then he had superhuman speed, fast reflexes. He could do things, eventually like vibrate through things and all that storyline. it says here he had a brief career as a football star, and then he donned his iconic red shirt with a lightning bolt coming up from his crotch instead of coming down, because there already was one, another superhero coming down, and his stylized metal helmet, which I always thought was kind of cool. It was based on the Roman god Mercury, or the FTD florist, whichever you, and even kids nowadays, it was a florist. But it's very iconic. I love hearing stories, people telling me stories. I haven't read that many of the originals, but telling me stories about how he used to carry around a lunch bag, a brown paper bag that he would slide the helmet in, so he would have it when he had to don it to go fight crime. So that always cool. It was always just such a cool visual of him. Again, as Mert said, he was one of the 3 surviving heroes from 0 Hour who didn't die or become their proper age when the event went down. He was older. It was explained away by a lot of magics and just his body did not age as quickly. When I first really started reading the Jay Garrick character was during that 0 Hour, and as Mert said, during the Justice Society series, and then Mark Waid would take him when he was doing a lot of his Flash family and bring him into the Frash family. Frash family. The Flash family, and even going so far as to kind of retconning in the fact that it wasn't so much the heavy water, but he was, as all the other Flash members of the Flash family, able to tap into what they called the lightning field, or the lightning force, speed force. Thank you, voice.
Don't mention it.
Do you see dead people
all the time? So that kind of also explained away some of his powers, and then eventually, I believe he was not able to tap into the Speed Force for a little bit, and he was not quite as fast. But still, his character was always one of those characters I always seemed to gravitate towards in any said story. The older character truly mentoring the new characters and being that person that, the younger characters would go to for advice, would be there. Sure, he made his mistakes like any other true human being, but he was more of that fatherly figure for other characters. He, along with Alan Scott and Ted Grant, were 3 of the characters that came back that were still physically fit enough that they could help lead the new team of Justice Society members. And it was always just kind of cool. So I also love the idea that his wife was still with him. They were, there was a family. In the Flash stories, it was that family that Wally needed that he could go to. They took Wally in, since Barry had died. They kind of took him in and treated them as their son and adopted son, and it was just great. Jay is, I want to say Jay's still around. I'm just trying to think. I don't think we've seen him in the New 52, have we?
Oh, on Earth 2.
On Earth 2 he is.
Well, the Earth 2, but I don't consider that Jay Garrick. So that's just a gentleman by the name of Jay Garrick who lives on Earth 2.
So if there is a main DC Earth, I don't know if that's considered Earth 1 or Earth 0 or what these days, a version of Jay Garrick. We have not seen yet.
That's true. So back then and that's why I had to put him on my list, because he's always just been one of those guys that I love the costume, and I love the way they've written him.
Well, and he inspired Barry with the stories that were written about him that Barry would read too.
You talk about and the iconic, Flash of Two Earths cover with he and Barry racing to save that child from the falling
girder. Isn't
girder,
it is. It's on a construction site.
It's just great, and then they take that storyline and in one of Julie Schwartz's most most innovative ways to bring him back, bring the original Flash back in. They say there's a bridge that goes to nowhere, and it's just a city out of time type deal, and they've always been there. So again, another great and interesting DC story from the past that just solidifies my love of that character.
With Liberty Bell, it really started with I like Jesse fine as Jesse Quick, a speedster, much like Flash and Jay and Barry Wally and all that. But after Infinite Crisis, when the Speed Force kind of went away for a while, she took up the mantle of Liberty Bell in the new JSA and was married to or just dating
Rick Tyler.
Rick Tyler.
The Our
son of
Man
Our
2.
Man.
Yeah,
They married, I thought.
They were married?
I know they were
couldn't
together, but I haven't read up far enough to know whether or not they were actually married.
I should have looked up a little bit more. I thought it was one of the more interesting ways to keep an established DC person around into a new character, much like they did with Barbara Gordon from Batgirl to Oracle. I thought it was well done. I thought she added a lot to being part of the JSA. I love the costume. I just fell in love with the character and what they brought her in to do with JSA and what she brought to the table and helping the other younger heroes out. Because at that time, Cyclone came into it.
Another great character.
And underused as well. Much like a lot of the Young Justice type characters that they brought in. I thought they were underused then after that series went away. But yeah, I just really, really enjoyed that they brought Liberty Bell into the fold and how they did it. It just all worked for me.
And yes, she was married to Rick Tyler.
Thank you.
All right.
And it's also another legacy character because her mom was Liberty Bell.
Yeah, so she had two legacies from which to choose.
Yeah.
She's kind of, I don't want to say unique in that regard. There have been other matings of superheroes before, but so she had a choice of following in her dad's or her mom's footsteps, and she got to do both at different times.
Both, yeah.
But I don't know that any character did it in that way. They usually melded them together, I think.
In some way, yeah. Like
rather than
in Kingdom Come, Nightstar, the
right.
daughter of Nightwing and Starfire.
Yeah. So this was a neat little twist. And still keeping it traditional, a nice lineage going through JSA.
Alrighty, and I guess it's my turn to go foist.
I guess so.
And this will be number 3. So I'm going to go with Sandman, Wesley Dodds.
I'm going with Sand as Sandy in the newer JSA.
Sure.
And I am going with Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel, another great character that I love. Again, it goes back to the costume, not anything. And I'm talking about the original costume, the original gas mask, not
the flatter one, the World War One type gas mask.
It would have had to been because when he first became Sandman, the USA hadn't entered World War II yet. But yeah. But are we talking about like the Sandman Mystery Theater version of Sandman?
Well, I'm just talking the original Sandman from like the original JSA.
Okay, that's wasn't really a gas mask as such. It was a mask that had some gas filters installed in it.
Yeah, but
it was a military issue.
Yeah, but it was still a gas mask.
Yeah,
that was the whole thing because he had to have that because he had the gun that sprayed like the sleeping potion or powder or formula, and he couldn't breathe it in. He had to have something that would filter that out. Just pure visual. I've bought some of the original Sandman archives, but I haven't got a chance to sit down and read them. So to me, it's just a pure visual. My knowledge of the character comes from said Sandman Mystery Theater. His various appearances in all of the storylines leading up to the creation of the JSA book, which happened upon his death. It was his death that kind of caused your character that you're going to be talking about to come back into the fold. That was at one point Sandman had a sidekick, which would be Sandy, and that's in his blue and gold
Purple.
Purple and gold. That's right.
Yeah,
No
that's-
mask, or no gas mask, or no type of gas mask days. When those were that was like Kirby's version of it.
Yep, Simon and Kirby. Yep.
So they kind of took that character, which had kind of gone away, and done that. It was always just, to me, interesting. There was always a cool element, definitely expounded upon by Matt Wagner in that series, more of an adult series, as in more mature themes. Made him a spy, made, a very interesting, almost shadow type figure, where they had, he had a network of people working for him and things like that. So just to be a very interesting character, inspired, Gaiman to use Sandman and come up, not so much use Sandman, but come up with a way to connect this Sandman with his Sandman, which we've discussed in our Book of the Month Club on Sandman Preludes and Nocturnes. So yeah, it's a character I've wanted to read more of. He was also part of the All-Star Squadron when they did that. He was a member of that. Roy Thomas used him there. So again, I would love to read more of the original stuff. I haven't, but I had to put him down just purely for visuals. Just always very cool. For any hero wearing a fedora, just is aces in my book. So I had to put Sandman, and Wesley Dodds would be the gentleman who took up the mantle of Sandman.
What I liked about Sanderson Hawkins as Sandy the Golden Boy taking up the mantle of not so much Sandman at first, he was just known as Sand once Wesley Dodds passed away. I kind of forget how Sandy got the power to manipulate Earth and go through things.
I can shed some light on that.
Okay.
This goes back to an old Bronze Age Justice League's, it was like a JLA, JSA team-up type story. It was called The Creature in the Velvet Cage, I think, or something along those lines, where this rampaging sand monster had gotten loose, and Sandman, with help from his teammates, managed to subdue the monster, and we learned that it's his former sidekick, Sandy Hawkins. The two of them had been working in Wesley Dodds' lab on an experimental silicoid gun, and it exploded and sprayed mutagenic silicon all over Sandy, and it mutated him into this big sand-based creature. And he went temporarily insane from the pain and was thrashing around, and so Wesley had to sedate him and keep him in a cage of sorts, doped out of his mind for decades. And never realizing until Sandy finally got loose after an earthquake that Sandy had regained his sanity shortly after Wesley had captured him. And so for all those decades, he was in his right mind, and he knew what was happening to him. And so Wesley Dodds had condemned him to a living hell. But eventually he recomposed himself. He learned to control his new silicon-based physiology. He's no longer a carbon-based being. He's silicon-based. And so he was able to assume an approximation of his old humanoid form. But he hadn't aged much, so that's why, although he was a member of the first generation of superheroes, of costume crime fighters, he's really no older than the average modern-age crime fighter at the time that the JSA in its 90s, late 90s incarnation got started.
And he did chair the JSA as time went on,
All
too.
right, now that I am positive
in
of.
that newer series for a little while. Very almost black ops kind of militaristic sweaters and
the turtleneck
combat pants, along with the guns that he had, a hat, and he did have a mask that he would wear. I can't remember if he actually needed it or if he just wore it in homage to Wesley Dodds' newer mask that he had, that flatter one.
I can't recall, but he did convert himself into sand and travel underground so
through things.
Maybe it helped him to breathe while he was down there.
And some things did happen to him. I don't know that I want to spoil that, but he came back, and I don't think he's silicon-based anymore. I thought he was turned back normal to just human and became Sandman then, but a little fuzzy on the later part of that JSA series as it was winding down before the New 52 came about.
I haven't read very much. I've only skimmed it, as you know. So I know the stage in his evolution you're talking about, and he looks badass in that Sandman costume.
Oh, yeah, with that funky cape, which I love, that kind of goes around his neck in two different directions, sort of. Very much like Dr. Midnight's, the newer Dr. Midnight, Pieter
Cross,
thank you. The way his cape is. But a lot of the same reasons that Jamie, just visually alone, I just love what they did with this, with Sanderson being Sand and then Sandman. Really a neat lineage, a neat generational character for the JSA. Just a lot of fun.
I do think it was cool that he was allowed to establish his own identity in the middle there, but between being Sandy the sidekick and assuming the mantle of his mentor, the Sandman.
And yet still having some bit of it in there. Just a little.
Yep, he got to do his own thing for a little while. All right, I guess we're up to me then. Okay. Yes. A character who seems like a perfect fit for the Justice Society from Go, but didn't get an opportunity to join until the 2000s. Now, he obviously was separated by dimensional barriers from the JSA back in the actual Golden Age. He was published by a different company, and which means that he lived on a different Earth. Since all DC's parallel Earths are largely based on retcon, it was established that all the Fawcett Publications characters, including the Marvel family, lived on Earth S. And so when Fawcett agreed to cease and desist publishing Captain Marvel in the early 50s, thanks to a successful lawsuit from DC claiming that he was too similar to Superman, he went away for a while. Trapped in a globe of suspendium. That was the explanation that DC eventually gave for... Yeah. This is from the Shazam series of the 70s, when DC acquired the rights to Captain Marvel and other Fawcett characters. And they showed that Captain Marvel and a lot of his friends and enemies all fell into a trap that Dr. Savannah had set for them.
It's a trap.
Just made me laugh in my head about what Savannah then did with another character in 52, which I don't want to spoil for those who may not have read it.
I know what you mean.
Suspendium.
Yep, that's where Suspendium comes from.
I didn't know that.
Yep, it was a lot sillier in the 70s.
Silly today, I can't even imagine it being sillier.
Yeah. So the use of Suspendium was a lot sillier than what Dr. Savannah used Suspendium for in 52. But anyway, like the JSA, Captain Marvel lost a good chunk of time during which he was absent from comics completely. It was about 10 years for the JSA. It was closer to 20 in Captain Marvel's case. And as a result of that, like the JSA, he's kind of acquired the character is... he's acquired connotations of corniness or... just old-timey wholesomeness is probably a better way to put it, even if his actual published adventures haven't always exhibited that quality. It's what people tend to think of when they think of the big red cheese. And they're both products of the same era, and his good-natured, childlike, gee-whizzing sense of wonder and the fact that he is both child and adult in one character, it's sort of like two different generations in one person. I mean, it makes him a good fit on a number of different levels for the new JSA that was put together by Robinson, Goyer, Johns and Company in the early 2000s. I remember when that Crisis Times 5 story arc appeared in Grant Morrison's JLA, which was sort of the earliest hint that the JSA was going to be making a comeback as a team. Captain Marvel was present and he was involved, and I was all excited even then that Captain Marvel was going to join either the JLA or perhaps even the JSA, either one of which would have been cool with me.
Because I never thought, as much as I love the Giffen, McGuire, DeMatteis run of Justice League, which had a very cheesy Captain Marvel in it, I never thought he got a fair shake or longevity.
Oh yeah, he wasn't allowed to stay there for very long.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and then he got his origin was rebooted a little bit there in the Power of Shazam graphic novels. But at least they didn't retcon out the fact that he had been a member of of the Bwahaha League.
Yeah.
But having him come into the JSA as one of the both youngster and adult. He can learn from the older, more experienced heroes of the society, and with whom he has more in common than any resident of the post-crisis DC universe could have imagined. So I always enjoy the issues of All-Star Squadron in which the Marvel family or other denizens of Earth S's universe guest starred, be it the Marvel family themselves or Mr. Mind or so on. I always thought it would be interesting if somehow Captain Marvel and his lieutenants could have crossed over to Earth 2 and been a part of the All-Star Squadron or the Justice Society of the original Earth 2. That, of course, never came to pass, but we got to see him, some of that potential fulfilled when Billy became a member of the Justice Society. Even had a little bit of a romantic dalliance, I think, or a mutual attraction with Courtney Whitmore, if I'm not mistaken. So he stuck around for a couple of years, and I thought he was used to good effect there. And I just thought that just because he seems to be an iconic character who who fits in with the general JSA spirit, who resonates well with the spirit of that team, and I thought I'd put him in my top 5.
And when you say that about Billy with Courtney, I don't think many people in the JSA know about Billy. They just know of Captain Marvel. I think she's one of the few in the newer JSA that knows he's the kid, which was part of, I think, their charm of flirting back and forth with each other.
Yeah, I think I can remember seeing. Again, this is a little bit in my future here as a reader. I'm aware that Billy was in the society, but I think I remember seeing in one of my skimmings of the JSA series, Billy actually going out of his way to reveal his secret to Courtney, perhaps to pull her out of a funk that she was feeling, feeling small and inexperienced in the face of all these legends of superheroism.
Yeah.
And he reveals to her, hey, I'm just a kid too, and I'm feeling a little out of my depth the same way you are.
Yeah, might have been with Jakeem too. I can't. Boy, I'm fuzzy on that. I got to go back and reread those.
Yep, all those members of the junior annex, say, the young provisional members of the society.
Okay. All right, everybody's looking at me now. I guess I get to talk. Well,
I thought you went first, though.
That's right. I did go first. Duh. Okay. I'm sorry. I was just doing a little backgrounding on who the person I was going next, so I thought I was next. Go ahead, Mr. Sheen. What's your number 2?
I'm going with Starman.
Excellent choice. Mine is Johnny Thunder.
Johnny Thunder. I thought you called him a dimwit.
A dumbass, actually.
Dumbass.
But
okay.
I'll justify that in a minute.
What's interesting, I mean, Starman is on my list, but he wasn't going to be one of the ones I was going to say. So, and we haven't crossed over a lot of characters. Ted Grant, Wildcat, will be my next one. Go ahead, Mr. Sheen.
My Starman is both Ted and his son Jack. And for those who may not know my affinity for Jack Knight as Starman, my God, I could pontificate, and I really should, for hours about Starman. If you don't know, go and read the Starman series that James Robinson wrote. Read the Justice Society, although he was not part of the JSA long when it came back in the late 90s. Much to my dismay, I wanted him around for a lot longer than what he was given. I still thought it was yet another great way to bring in the next generation of a character from the original JSA into the new JSA. And in his own series, the relationship between him and his father that grew out of the circumstances that started that series just made me fall in love with the character, and I have been and probably will be forever. Such a great character on so many levels for me. That I think it was a lost opportunity to keep him in the JSA. I think it was because he had his own series that they didn't allow him to stay in the JSA, so that what James was doing in the Starman series wouldn't get blurred or confused or anything like that. Keep him separate from most of the regular DC universe in a lot of ways. There was some bleed over, but there really wasn't a whole lot. But I really would have loved to seen Jack be in the JSA a lot more. And I have some of the old boy, are they All-Star comics?
From the 70s?
Even before that, the archive ones were
Oh, yeah, All-Star Comics. Yeah.
where Ted would have been in, and I've always wanted to read those early JSA ones to get more of a feel of Ted. And I have the old Starman archives that came out. And I have yet to read those, like you with Sandman.
I've actually gotten to read a couple of those. Somebody bought one and brought it to me one of the times I was in the hospital. So I sat down
nice.
and was read a couple issues. And they were goofy, but it was fun. It really was.
And as much as I think DC always has done very well with a lot of their lineage and children of heroes going through the ages, I think there's something that much more special about Starman between Ted and Jack.
And one of the fun he was also one of the ones that came back in 0 Hour,
Yeah.
but he had
aged.
They allowed him. He was one of the ones that came back, but they aged because a lot of them aged quickly to where they should have been and passed away. But he was one of the ones that aged, and they let him stay his age. So it was, again, great setup by James Robinson to have not only Jack but to have his other son.
Yeah.
And my brain is not
David.
working. David.
Thank you. God.
Have taken up the mantle, and it was upon his, I won't say what it was, but it was upon something that happened at the beginning of the series that Jack was forced into taking up the mantle of Starman, and
really grew into it.
And grew into it so
much to his dismay.
Made it his
beautifully.
own,
Yeah.
far more so than a lot of other legacy characters.
Yeah.
He's,
because to me, you can say, well, if it was real life, he allowed himself to do it, but it was just good writing at that point. By to take something and add such a rich history to it that maybe didn't have as much of a rich history, but to just take characters and to respect them, and then just to make them universal. Put them in a universal, everybody can relate to story.
And as much as I am totally a Justice League guy and love almost any iteration and incarnation of that series, I really think if I was trapped on a desert island and somebody said, you can take one series with you, I'd pluck Starman and Shade and take that with me. And that would be all I'd have.
He definitely is on my list. I was going to make him one of my alternates because I knew I wanted to give you that one. And to me, there's so many other characters that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
all right, I guess it's down to me and Johnny Thunder. Say you.
Say you.
Say you, say me.
Say me.
Say it together.
That's what I should have freaking done for the song for this. Part of this.
Yeah, Lionel Richie is the lead-in to the JSA. Yeah. Okay, yes, it is true that I referred to Johnny Thunder as a dumbass a few minutes ago, and he kind of was. He was a dimwit. Your word applies just as well as mine, Jamie. He was a bumbler, a bungler, a dreamer, a drifter, a dabbler. He was not very. He wasn't the smartest. Wasn't the sharpest tack in the box, not the brightest bulb on the string. His Thunderbolt, his mystical Botnesian Thunderbolt, who years later was retconned as a fifth-dimensional entity, akin to Mr. Mix's Pitlick, was actually considerably smarter than he was. And in the early days of his strip in Flash Comics, the Thunderbolt would usually take every opportunity to make his master, quote-unquote, look foolish. The Thunderbolt originally didn't have much in the way of dialogue. He was just kind of a mute little, barely even seen, mostly invisible presence. If you remember Kingdom Come, there was like an early version of Jakeem Thunder appeared there, who had Thunderbolt powers, and he wore a hooded sweatshirt with an image on the front of it of like a cloud-like being with its foot sticking up in the air and a big smile on its face. That's an image from an early Johnny Thunder cartoon or story in the Golden Age, when Johnny Thunder had idly wished that he could get up to a second or third story window, and the Thunderbolt obliged by kicking Johnny in the pants so hard that he actually flew up, propelled by Thunderbolt foot to the window he was trying to reach. So yeah, the relationship between Johnny and his Thunderbolt was stormy at the beginning, and they kind of grew to understand each other a little better, and the Thunderbolt became a character in its own right, gradually. But at first he was just this schmo This multiple-time loser, seventh son of a seventh son, that's how he was able, which, according to popular superstition, is supposed to give one certain supernatural hoodoo. That's what made him eligible to receive this Thunderbolt in the first place. But he wasn't lucky in many other regards. However much he may have had going for him that way, he wasn't all that bright. He couldn't hold a job. He just kind of drifted from episode to episode. His strip read a little bit like a two-reeler humorous short subjects, popular in cinema of the time, the early 40s. He was definitely a humor character, not really a superhero in the strictest sense, although he did sometimes thwart criminals, and sometimes ended up doing it accidentally. The way his power worked was anytime he uttered the magic words, "say you," CEI-U, which sound exactly like the common expression "say you," SAYYOU, the Thunderbolt would kind of pop in and make anything he happened to say come true. So he would accidentally cause all kinds of wacky magical things to happen just by accidentally saying "say you" and then saying something else aloud, which the Thunderbolt would then make a reality. So yeah, he was played for laughs for the most part, and when he was... It's just so interesting to me that he was folded into the JSA. He doesn't quite even belong to the same genre as the JSA did, or at least not at the beginning. And to see him worked in there, though, and to make it work, he was kind of treated as the JSA's mascot for the longest time. Just this, likable chowderhead in his green checked suit and his bow tie. But somehow, all the same, he was arguably one of the most powerful members of the team. He had this other-dimensional being at his beck and call that could alter reality to his whim. So we should just be kind of glad that he's fairly simplistic mentally, and that his heart was, however little he may have been lacking upstairs, his heart was always in the right place. And he was kind of, I would argue, the heart and conscience of the JSA. He helped to keep them grounded, in addition to making them laugh. And he proved that you didn't need to be, a wealthy playboy or an Ivy League educated archaeologist or a sorcerer or any of that stuff to be a hero. I mean, he and Al Pratt were probably the most plebeian members of the group. There was an interesting story written by Our Man's Tom Pyre, which was published in, I think, Golden Age, Secret Files and Origins, sometime in the early 90s. I talked about it in an episode of the Time Bubble a while ago, in which Tom Pyre depicted some kind of charity dinner that the JSA were attending, and it showed them sitting at tables divided along social class lines, because that's something that you didn't see explored very much in the early days of the JSA. When they were all just, costumes and powers more than personalities. But when you break it down, you think about how characters from such different walks of life, who have nothing in common besides the fact that they all wear brightly colored costumes and fight crime, how would they all interact? So Johnny Thunder is definitely on the déclassé side of that divide. But he, for all that he was a hothead and a bumbler and all of that, he sometimes helped remind the other JSA members when they were getting a little bit, pompous and sanctimonious, as they sometimes could, to remind them of the human aspect, of the common man's perspective of right and wrong. And so I think he was valuable in that regard. And just beyond that, I just thought it was cool that a guy in a green checked suit and a bow tie with a magic ready kilowatt at his disposal was able to hold his own and stand side by side with these costume titans of a bygone age. So I just thought it was really neat that just a guy in a bow tie can be a superhero too, if he's just got enough pluck and luck and a magic thunderbolt. And I just thought I also kind of like the fact that he had his own little private genie to grant whatever stupid wishes came to mind. Yes, and any character that uses a magic word to activate his or her powers. It's like a special bit of vocabulary for my fanboy's memory to memorize and employ. So yeah, since Johnny Thunder had his magic word, "say you," that raised him several notches in my estimation there. So there we go. The JSA's everyman, more than a mascot. Don't let anybody tell you different. Johnny Thunder.
More than a mascot. Again, one of the things I have always enjoyed about certain superheroes is the fact that they don't have superpowers. And there's no greater example of that than the next character on my list, which is Wildcat. His alias is Ted Grant. I was just kind of reading, as I was saying, I was reading up on this character because I know of him, but I don't. It's one of those characters who just, he kind of is. He's kind of there. He's been retconned. Not so much retcon, but he's one of those characters that the superheroes go to learn how to fight. He is just he's just a human, a normal human. And he's one of his magical powers is he supposedly has 9 lives. He's just a peak human condition fighter. He is a world-class boxer. He's trained. They've now some of this they've kind of retconned in, but he's trained other heroes such as Batman, Black Canary. They say, I guess, when Superman fought Muhammad Ali, maybe it says Superman was one of the people he taught how to fight. So it's just one of those cool characters. I always love these characters who are just, who are the quintessential man's man, the tough guy walking right out of a Ernest Hemingway novel. They've since given him a son that was in the Justice Society series, which was kind of interesting, giving him almost a legacy unto himself. His son, I guess, was more cat-like and had cat powers.
Yeah, literally a lycanthrope. He could turn himself into a human cat. Tomcat, I think he called himself. Yeah. Because his name was Tom. Yeah,
so it's just one of those characters that's kind of, he's there. He's one of the guys that will jump into the fight first, even when more powerful, he's going up against a more powerful foe. Just always one of those characters that I gravitate towards. I like that kind of story. While I'm not that, you say sometimes you like the characters that you aren't, that you wish you were, that are characters that you appreciate their strength of character. He's one of those characters for me. Plain talking, straight shooting. They've used him in various great storylines. I mean, he's had affairs with, was it Power Girl he had an affair with for a little bit? And I think it might have been Selena Kyle for a while there. They did Ed Brubaker did a great Catwoman story where she something had happened to her in Gotham and she had to kind of go out on the road for a little while. Yeah. And I honestly believe the storyline was called On the Road. And she goes with her assistant. I can't think of her name right now. Was it Holly?
Holly, yeah.
Yeah. And they kind of go to Ted, and she takes out kind of her frustrations in the boxing ring with Ted, and you kind of come to realize that they know one another, and he's not like an official mentor to her, but he definitely is a person she goes to when she has problems, gives her good advice, that kind of stuff. So it's just a character I've come to love. Just realizing now he was actually a character that his first appearance was Sensation Comics number one. Yep. Back in 1942. He was created by Bill Finger and drawn by Erwin Hasen, who a lot of people know did the original Green Lantern. The Alan Scott Green Lantern. So,
in fact, I believe in that story in Sensation number 1, Wildcat is shown reading an issue of All American Comics with a Green Lantern story in it, and that's what inspired him to become a masked mystery man himself.
Very cool. So there you go. Yeah, it's one of those characters. I love those down to earth, salt of the earth type guys. So.
Yep, and you are definitely not alone in that, Jamie. I think several comic book writers are also fond of those real man's men, tough as nails type characters. They're seduced by the masculine mystique that the masters of the sweet science possess, and so they see something compelling about having just an expert fist fighter standing his ground and holding his own in the same class as, just like I said about Johnny Thunder, these costumed gods using nothing more than his own 2 fists and buckets of grit.
That's right.
Yeah,
A spit bucket.
later he got 9 lives, but that was much later.
Much later, yeah. I think
A little weird.
some adventure he had involving Bast, the Egyptian cat goddess. I haven't gotten the full story on that yet.
So, alrighty, Mr. Murdo, take us home.
All right, my choice for number 1 JSA, in eerie reflection of my choice for number 1 JLA, the Superman of Earth 2.
Ooh. Mine would be The Spectre, Jim
And
Corrigan.
Mine is Dr. Midnight.
He's Dr. Midnight.
Not Charles McKnight, although he's great. It's
Peter Cross. Okay. So, yeah, I don't think I need to do too much of a tap dance to justify this. I mean, he's Superman. I mean, he's the greatest hero of the greatest generation and of pretty much every other generation to follow. He is the greatest icon ever produced by comic fiction, I say, without too much fear of contradiction. And just, I know that he wasn't around in the early JSA stories that much. The idea was to have it act as a showcase for characters that didn't have their own ongoing series. But he and Batman did show up on occasion. Wonder Woman eventually joined in later on. But anytime in the JSA stories from later decades that I've read, anytime the Earth 2 versions of any of the big 3, the Trinity, show up, it just lends that extra air of grandeur and importance to the goings on. It's like he's this great elder statesman of superheroes, titan among titans, and all the talk I'm making here of legacy and grandeur and. He's just a stately presence. I mean, however much the other members of the JSA possess these things or don't possess them, in the case of Johnny Thunder, Superman, he just legitimizes the entire enterprise. Anytime he's on hand, it's just with that funky-looking, curvy Art Deco-styled S that so many artists have drawn the Earth 2 Superman is wearing, and those ribbed cuffs on his shirt and the white temples. He's just... he is the most interesting man on Earth 2. And the JSA is just that much cooler when his iconic presence is lent to their doings. So, and then the Earth 2 Batman and Wonder Woman are nice to have around too, but you need the big blue, really. And I've been sorry that Superman has not been able to be, that Superman, Kal-El, has not been able to be a part of the JSA since Crisis happened, and there's been no such thing as him. I mean, we got to see him come back a little bit in Infinite Crisis, but obviously he was more of an antagonist's role in that story. And I was kind of happy when the Kingdom Come Superman got to travel across universal borders and be a part of the JSA.
Yeah, that was neat.
In the mid to late part of this most recent decades. It's not quite the same thing as having the Earth 2 Superman back and taking his rightful place in the JSA's ranks, but it gave me a little bit of that same thrill. So anytime I pick up an old issue of All-Star Squadron or the All-Star Comics run of the 70s and see Superman there interacting with his fellow crime fighters, or in the case of All-Star Comics, interacting with his cousin, Power Girl, coming up through the JSA ranks as part of the Super Squad. It's just JSA at its finest when the finest superhero of them all is able to join in their adventures. So, I decided I had to give the Man of Might the number 1 spot on my list.
Very cool. My number 1 was The Spectre, Jim Corrigan. Now, while he wasn't as much a part of the later incarnations of the Justice Society, he was kind of thrown into the original Justice Society. It was just one of those where they threw a lot of superheroes from the various books into this title. I haven't read a lot of those stories myself, but I love the character so much. I just had to make him the number 1. For those of you who may not know, his first appearance was in More Fun Comics number 52. 52. And what it basically was is he was a hard-boiled police detective who was killed by the mob. His body was put into cement, thrown into the water. This crime boss was named a gentleman named
Gats Benson.
Yep. And his soul went to heaven. He was so enraged that he would not go through the pearly gates. So the Archangel Michael bonded him with God's spirit of vengeance. And
a lot of what you're saying here actually came from John Ostrander's 90s series, so it's retcons. But yeah, in the original Golden Age origin, it's just he heard a voice from beyond offering him a chance to come back and avenge evil, and he took it. So the idea that he was too angry to go through the pearly gates, that's an Ostrander thing.
Okay. Still in all, that's it's you can he added stuff to what was there. And so it's one of those where he just kind of, like I said, the publishers put him together with them. He was that was kind of the his whole the shtick, if you want to put it that way. And then he would come, and as Murd said, to me, the definitive version of the Spectre story is in said series with John Ostrander writing it, Tom Mandrake doing the art for the most part for the series. And it really played up the whole God's vengeance and an angel of death and the angel taking it in various ways, telling great stories, very Sandman-esque stories. But at the heart of it, I just think is a very interesting, almost vengeance story of not getting killed and then coming back, reaping your vengeance on the people that did you wrong, and just in some very, very interesting ways. Again, to me, a lot of the earlier heroes like this was a lot of visual, and with pale white ghost-like body, a green cape, just really a cool visual.
Little green Speedo and matching booties
and gloves. So I do definitely would want to sit down and read some more of the Justice of the All-Star Comics version of this character, and but he had to for the Ostrander storyline itself, and I know his origins were in Justice Society. I had to put him as number one on my list.
Yeah, the Spectre was really didn't have the Spectre of the Golden Age didn't have very much in common with what he became. Well, even like in the Bronze Age, those Michael Fleischer written adventure comic stories where he started killing criminals in ghastly and ironic ways. He was basically just a ghost cop.
Okay.
In the old days, what you know of the guy from Ostrander, it doesn't reflect very closely what the character was like in the 40s.
Okay.
But still, I mean, like the whole idea of him being the manifestation of God's wrath on Earth, that didn't really enter into it.
Oh, okay.
But it was still cool to have a ghost on the team, just to show that they're not discriminating or anything. Yep. Just and in hindsight, just taking into account all the Ostrander established things you've been talking about, Jamie, it is kind of neat to think that in addition to all those more or less human beings just sitting around in their brightly colored costumes, some of whom didn't even have any superhuman powers at all, right next to the Atom, this short guy in a cape, you had the incarnation of the wrath of God. It's kind of a God had a place at the table.
That's right.
The Judeo-Christian ethos is right there in the midst of all the other crime fighters and their respective ideologies. You can see it as like a microcosmic comment on 40s society if you want.
Sure.
Or you could just see it as there being a
ghost cop.
Yeah, ghost cop.
Dr. Midnight for me really started visually due to needing a Halloween costume one year. And I had already made a Red Robin costume from a la Kingdom Come the previous year. And I was trying to reuse as much of that as possible, and Dr. Midnight kind of fit that bill, so I did it.
Yeah, the same like red jerkin and
Yeah.
the same dark cowl with cape.
Cape, boots, the whole 9 yards. So it was an easy way for me to get a new costume. And then I started to enjoy the character reading his exploits in JSA. Peter Cross is a doctor. He's on par of like a super doctor, does checkups and operations on the superheroes as needed and helps investigate strange things that come across, just like everybody else in the JSA, but he brings a scientific eye to it, much like Mr. Terrific does with technology, I would say. It doesn't hurt that he had a brief romance with Black Canary, which I thought was cool before she married Green Arrow a couple years later. He did have an owl, just as the original Doctor Who, God heavens, Dr. Midnight had. Talk about an owl and Doctor, and it comes out Doctor Who. The owl's name, which I did not remember, he called Charlie. I knew Hootie was the old Dr. Midnight's owl, Charles McNider's. So I didn't remember that Peter's owl was Charlie.
Named after Charles McNider, one assumes.
I would think. But it was... Again, all of my characters really ground in the new JSA because that's what I read. That's what I knew of the JSA. I had never, and still really haven't, read much of anything, even in the 70s and before. Certainly not before. So just a neat character that started out with me needing a Halloween costume and being yet another cool way to bring some classic JSA character into the present, giving a little bit of a difference with his powers and what he can do, giving him the fact that he's a medical doctor. It was just a neat blend, and I really grew to like the character in the JSA. Just really cool.
Yep. I like Dr. Midnight, too, quite a bit. Actually, one of the original, Charles McNider, just barely missed making my list. He's probably my first alternate. Peter Cross is cool, too. Matt Wagner.
A moral compass too, doesn't he? I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Peter's got a pretty strict moral compass,
pretty clearly defined. Yeah. So he was defender of. As you say, he was a medical doctor, and he took his Hippocratic oath more serious,
quite seriously.
Than some. So much so that he actually, took to the streets, and he was even before he got his supervision and became a costume crime fighter. He was known as like the Night Doctor or the Midnight Doctor of Portsmouth, and he would go around just helping people who couldn't afford medical assistance through traditional channels, and even people who were not allowed. Well, I don't think he had any problem with treating criminals if he thought if the need was urgent enough. So his moral, well said. His moral code, his moral compass, was interesting to read, and his relationship with Black Canary was fun to watch unfolding, although it ultimately didn't come to anything. I still think I kind of prefer the original, the Golden Age version. I like his costume better. It's simpler. I like the red, green, and brown color scheme.
And I like the red and black.
Yeah, there's too much red and black going around, but there's some black in the original too. But like the red, green, and brown and black with the moon-shaped buttons, reminding me of the long-lost and loudly lamented Yellow Moon marshmallow from Lucky Charms. Yeah, it's a cool design given the time for the 40s particularly.
Yeah.
It's striking, and the trained owl is always a plus
owls
too.
Are just cool.
And I think I respect the fact that Dr. Midnight, whether we're talking about the Golden Age version or the more recent Peter Cross version, he's basically Batman MD. Minus a lot of the attitude and most of the tragic motivations. He was motivated by little more than the fact that his eyesight was badly damaged by criminals. But the thing that, one of the things that, besides the costume, for example, that gives Charles McNider the edge for me over Peter Cross is, the fact that he didn't feel the need to, he didn't have all the fancy technology that Peter Cross amassed for himself, and he didn't have the, shadow cabinet-like network of helpers that Dr. Midnight had in Portsmouth City. All he had was his own wits, his medical knowledge, his determination, his blackout bombs, and an owl. That was it. And he still earned himself a slot on the JSA that way. And I think he, probably Peter Cross more than Charles McNider, got to earn himself a position as like unofficial field medic of the society. But I think we saw Peter Cross serving in that role much more than we ever saw the original Dr. Midnight. So points to Peter Cross for that. And I agree with you that Peter Cross is an interesting extrapolation of a Golden Age concept. And if he'd been introduced just maybe 15 years earlier than he was, we'd be referring to him as the Earth One Dr. Midnight. Yeah. He could step right into that position. He's got the name and costume of a Golden Age character, but he is a different person underneath. No essential connection. He's not really a legacy in the truest sense. No. And I think it's kind of refreshing to have a few members of the JSA that are like that. They're not all just like direct relatives or apprentices or whatever. So, good choice.
Good choice. All right, do we have any alternates? Any just missed the list?
Two alternates that I have is the Robin of Earth 2, I think it is, with the not the gray outfit with the Robin symbol.
The bat and the R in the middle of it.
The other outfit, the yellow arms and legs and the red chest.
Yep, and the green mask that extends all the way up his face.
Yeah, like a
from
Cyclopsian type mask. And I don't know that he ever became an actual member of JSA, but I put on Black Adam as part of my alternates because that was a cool, pretty long time that he was part of this newer JSA in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yes. That was his involvement in that title was a big damn deal.
And quite ambiguous in a lot of ways, and eventually falling away from it, and then taking Atom Smasher with him.
Yeah, to form his own little squad.
To defend Kahndaq and
reclaim his ancestral homeland over there and make himself the ruler of it.
Yeah,
so, controversial actions there.
Interesting that he was able to convince Atom Smasher so easily, given what happened to Atom Smasher in that recent time, to the genocide, would you say, in order to take back Kahndaq and keep it?
I really don't know what they had to do to take Kahndaq back.
I thought they had to kill a lot of people. Well, okay, never mind.
Yeah, this is true. I know that they have. He assembled a team of equally morally liminal characters to go with him over there to liberate Kahndaq, as I'm sure he considered it. But I don't know what the human cost was. But I guess it must have been pretty steep for the JSA to get involved.
Really turn their backs on him then too.
Yeah. But he never was more than a probationary member, but he counts.
Yeah. I'd put him in.
Yeah, he's cool. Fascinating. He's one of those morally ambiguous characters that fandom seems to gravitate towards. Yeah. So he's like
one of the stronger ones working through 52 as well, I thought.
No doubt.
That weekly title.
Yep. So yeah, he's definitely he's on my alternates list as well, just because I like anytime villains, characters who have been traditionally portrayed as villains get to move a bit towards the white end of the moral spectrum and serve as a hero for a time. So it always gives them an opportunity to flesh out these characters. Villains tend to be such underdeveloped figures. So letting them step into the shoes of hero/protagonist for a little while, it gives you the readers a chance to get to know them a little better. Another alternate that I have on my list for the same reason is the Second Icicle, because he was kind of an unofficial JSAer out of necessity more than desire or volition during the Stealing Thunder arc, when the Ultra Humanite got control of Johnny Thunder's Thunderbolt and took over the world. And so we got this little B team of reserve JSAers, including the villainous Icicle. So Johns get to play around with him to much the same effect as they did with Captain Cold in The Flash. Yeah. And I enjoyed the Icicle's role in that particular arc. Shows that he, also like Captain Cold, was a bad guy who could occasionally tread the path of angels when necessity warranted it. I have the original Hour Man on here. Okay. I have the Spectre. I have the original Red Tornado, Ma Hunkle, who showed up at the first meeting of the JSA but accidentally ripped her long johns and fled in embarrassment. And also her granddaughter, Cyclone.
She's on mine as well.
Yeah, who, like me, she's a great character, peppy, bubbly. She's got self-esteem issues. She's a bit of a know-it-all at times. I can relate to that. And she's also a fan of L. Frank Baum's Oz books. So
that's right.
That's worthy of inclusion there. I've got the original Mr. Terrific, Terry Sloan. I've got Sandy as Sandman, when he put on that cool costume we were talking about earlier. I've got the original Earth 2 Huntress.
I do have Huntress on here, yeah.
I've got Damage because I'm a child of the 90s, and I thought it was kind of cool that that forgotten character of the early 90s got to come into his own and become a member of the JSA eventually, and die in that role. And last but not least, the third Amazing Man.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Marcus Clay, who joined the group later on. That was a character that had potential, and I'm sorry we didn't get to see a little bit more of him.
I had Huntress. I also had Power Girl, Hawkman and Hawkgirl, Batman and Superman, Flash, Jay Garrick, Alan Scott, Green Lantern, Wildcat, Cyclone, Dr. Fate.
And I have one more, Johnny Quick. Jamie, who do you have?
Pretty much everybody you've named.
Well, name them again.
Ones I didn't list were, of course, Ted and Jack Knight, Starman.
Because you knew Shane was going to
I knew
mention them.
Shane, and I wanted to give Shane that one.
And I appreciate that.
Hawkman, of course, Carter Hall, and Johnny Thunder, again, for all the reasons Mert said. And I also went with the Red Tomato and Ma Hunkel. I just loved the fact that, they started out with her and, she made her an honorary member. And then again, another great character Johns brings back, allows her to come out of quote unquote witness protection and become the curator of the headquarters, the Wesley Dodds mansion.
The Brownstone? Is that what was it called that?
Yeah, it was his brownstone. That's where they had their headquarters and the quote unquote Justice Society Museum. So yeah, some fun characters. And this is one of those that, as we talked about it really is, when you think about the Justice Society, a lot of times it is All-Star Comics or the JSA, but you also do have to put in, as Mert is so fond of reminding me, and reminding us, I should say, as listeners, and he doesn't have to remind me because I've read just about the entire series, the great All-Star Squadron mini series, I should say not mini series, but series from, DC in the 80s. Just some great use of these characters. Again, explaining away why they didn't fight in World War II, to the fact of just taking a lot of some smaller characters and bringing them to the front. Characters, as we talked about, like the original Liberty Bell, Johnny Quick, and just some great characters. Never really using a lot of the big guns all the time, but still making it a series well worth reading. So really, this is Justice Society. If you talk about a team that has lasted a long time, it's got to be, even though at times they didn't call themselves the Justice Society. You got to figure this is a book that's going from the 40s through the 2000s in one incarnation or another at one time or another. So it is one of those long-lasting team titles. You think 50 years, 60 years of a title is a lot when you're looking at 75 years, things like that. That's a long title. So. Alrighty. So another top 5 in the books. Please, as I said, give us your list on the forums. Shane will tell you where to go to talk about what your top 5 was, to yell at us for saying, for what we said and disagreeing or agreeing with what we said. I always love seeing these because there are some characters that invariably I'll smack my head Bull Shannon style and say, why didn't I think of that? So, but before we get to the very end, I do want to thank our sponsor for this show, which will be Discount Comic Book Service, dcbservice.com. If you want to stretch that comic dollar, and hey, who doesn't, go to their location, place an order. It could be one comic, it could be 20 comics, it could be 50 comics, it could be 1,000 comics. You can hit that yes to every single issue. They'll love you, and you'll save a crap load of money. So dcbservice.com if you want to stretch that comic dollar.
Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by the Comic Forums and comment on this episode and give us your top 5 JSAers. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. We would like to thank everyone who contributes to the show. We really do appreciate it. And I want to see a lot of lists of who's who on your top 5. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes, one listener at a time.
Say it for always. That's the way it should be. Say you, say me. Say it together naturally.